Lagos never forgets horror, not when it's soaked in blood and tied to a name the whole city once chanted in prayer. The story of Pastor Amos Ibuka Joshua, once hailed as a firebrand prophet in Ikeja, Lagos, has gripped the hearts of Nigerians in a way that's hard to explain. This is not just another tale of scandal. It's darker, stranger, more tragic than anything the city has witnessed in recent memory. He was a man adored by thousands. The founder and overseer of Fire of Thunder Ministries International, his sermons shook rooftops, and his prayers were known to bring people to their knees, both spiritually and physically. With a voice that cracked the air like lightning and hands that supposedly healed the sick, Amos Ibuka Joshua wasn't just a preacher, he was a symbol of divine power. He had 3 beautiful children, David, Miracle, and Little Glory. Everyone in the church adored them. They were often brought on stage during crusades, wrapped in white garments, heads anointed with oil, as the crowd screamed, "Daddy Gio. More grace." They were the image of holiness, the seeds of the anointed. His wife, Gloria, was always beside him, smiling like a proud queen, dressed in flowing lace gowns, speaking only when needed, supporting every word of the so-called man of God. Then one night in late July, Lagos changed forever. The first call came to the Ikeja Area Command at around 3:48 a.m. It was a distressed voice, female, breathless, terrified. The only words that came through clearly were, "There is blood, too much blood," he's chanting. Before officers could trace the call, it disconnected. By 4:30 a.m., neighbors around the high-fenced mansion in Okofa were gathering, whispering nervously. Something was wrong. A woman had run out of the house screaming earlier, barefoot, clothes torn, crying in a language no one could understand. The compound's gate was strangely ajar, something that had never happened, not in Pastor Amos' house. Then came the flies. By sunrise, they were everywhere, swarming the gate, hovering around the compound like they had been summoned. The stench followed soon after, thick, metallic, and sickening. When the police finally broke through the front door, the house was dead silent. The living room was untouched, pristine, with gold-trimmed furniture and giant-framed photos of the family. But upstairs, the horror began. The trail of blood started from the hallway, leading to the private prayer room at the end of the corridor. The door was shut, bolted from the inside. Officers knocked. No response. Then they heard it, murmuring, like someone was talking to themselves, or to something invisible. When the door came down, time froze. There, in the center of the room, surrounded by strange markings drawn in chalk and blood, knelt Pastor Amos Ibuka Joshua. His upper body was bare, covered in symbols and bruises. His lips moved rapidly, speaking in a tongue that no officer recognized, thick, guttural sounds that made even the bravest men shudder. In front of him were 3 wooden bowls. Each bowl contained a human head. Each head belonged to one of his children. David. Miracle. Glory. Positioned like sacred offerings, their eyes closed, faces calm, almost peaceful, as if death had kissed them gently. There was no sign of panic or pain. Just a chilling, eerie silence. An officer vomited on the spot. Another began to scream, his voice cracking in disbelief. The horror was too complete. Too deliberate. But Pastor Amos did not react. He simply turned his blood-stained face toward the officers and smiled. Then he whispered, "They are not dead. They have risen. I gave them to the flame." News spread like wildfire. Before noon, Lagos was ablaze with rumors and disbelief. Blogs ran with the headline, "Popular pastor sacrifices his children in ritual," others labeled it fake news, a satanic attack on the body of Christ. But the evidence was undeniable. By evening, the church was shut down by state officials. Angry mobs gathered outside its gates, tearing down banners with his face on them, some crying, others cursing. Faithful members fell to their knees, praying that this was all a mistake, that their beloved Daddy Gio was being framed. But the police had more than just blood and bowls. They had footage. From a hidden CCTV camera installed in his prayer room without his knowledge. It showed everything. The chanting. The children walking in willingly. Him touching their foreheads gently, speaking softly to them. The moment he raised what appeared to be a glowing blade, one not made of metal, but something else entirely. The moment their heads were taken off, quickly, without struggle. But what disturbed the investigators most was not just the killings, it was what happened afterward. The pastor didn't flee. He didn't panic. He sat down, began to sing, and placed the heads in the bowls like one setting food before a guest. What kind of man could do such a thing to his own children? The answer came days later, when his wife, Gloria, was found hiding in a prayer mountain in Ogun State. She had been missing since the incident. Weak, pale, and shivering, she told a story that shook the police to their bones. He changed after that Ghana prophet visited us last year, she said, barely able to lift her head. He brought something with him, a horn, said it was an ancient relic. He started locking himself in for days, reading strange books, praying in languages even he didn't understand. According to her, the children had been having nightmares. Terrible ones. Talking in their sleep. Drawing symbols they had never been taught. He said they were chosen, she whispered, that their blood would awaken the voice of the throne buried beneath the altar. The house was searched thoroughly again. Hidden behind a false wall in his library, they found it, a small shrine, surrounded by dried bones, ashes, and a book bound in what felt like human skin. On its cover, written in dark ink, were the words, "Big shall rise again." The deeper the police dug, the more questions came up. A list of names, high-profile politicians, businessmen, pastors, was found in the shrine. Some had crosses over them. Others had stars beside them. Were they next? Or had they already paid their own price? As for the children's bodies, they were never found. Just the heads. Experts claimed the cuts were made by something not of this world, burn marks around the necks, no sign of typical human violence. The heads remained preserved, unrotting. Even in the mortuary freezer, their skin stayed soft. Their eyes never reopened, but their lips remained curled in that same mysterious smile. And yet, Pastor Amos remained calm. Silent. He refused to speak for days. When he finally opened his mouth during the initial court hearing, he looked directly at the judge and said, "You cannot imprison one who walks between words." The court erupted. Security had to drag him away as he laughed, not a maniacal laugh, but one soft and calm, as if he knew something no one else did. He has since been placed in maximum security under strict watch, pending further psychological evaluations and trial. But something strange is happening. Guards have reported hearing children's laughter in the night near his cell. And one whispered that sometimes, it feels like the pastor isn't in the cell at all. Just his body. The prison officials at Kirikiri Maximum Security were used to all kinds of inmates, ritualists, murderers, even hardened terrorists. But Pastor Amos Ibuka Joshua unsettled even the toughest wardens. At first, they dismissed the rumors. Strange things always followed high-profile arrests in Nigeria. But this was different. This man was different. On the third night of his imprisonment, something unexplainable happened. A prison guard on night duty, Officer Lonra, was making his usual rounds when he paused near cell B13, where Pastor Amos was held in solitary. The man had been silent for hours, staring at the wall, unmoving. But that night, as Lonra approached, he heard what sounded like a child giggling. He stopped. Giggling, in a maximum security wing. It didn't make sense. He turned to leave. Then, from inside the cell, he heard a soft, young voice whisper, "Uncle, we are cold." Lonra stumbled back, nearly dropping his flashlight. He called for backup, but when they opened the cell, Pastor Amos was sitting cross-legged in the corner, eyes closed, lips moving in prayer. Alone. They searched the entire block. Nothing. No one. But Lonra refused to work night shifts again. And he wasn't the only one. Over the next week, strange reports multiplied, guards seeing shadows that didn't belong to anyone, the sound of children crying softly through the pipes, Bibles mysteriously burning to ash inside locked drawers. The warden tried to move Pastor Amos to another cell. But the prison priest warned against it. He is not just a man. There's something following him. binding him. If we move him, it may not stay locked. It took the Lagos state government days to calm the public. Riots had broken out in front of the church headquarters. Devoted followers had split into factions, those who still believed he was innocent and those who called him the prophet of hellfire. Some screamed that the government was persecuting a man of God. Others said he should be hanged publicly. The tension exploded on a Sunday morning when a group of enraged residents broke into the Fire of Thunder Ministries International building in Ikeja. They smashed everything: pulpits, offering boxes, chairs. The altar, once polished and glowing under lights, was soaked with kerosene and set ablaze. Church records, anointed oils, even holy mantles, were dragged out and burned. The church, once a sanctuary, became a graveyard of belief. 3 church workers were arrested for hiding evidence, ritual items buried beneath the children's Sunday school floor. Bones. Dolls with faces carved out. A small jar containing 3 preserved tongues. The court trial that followed was the most watched in Nigeria's history. Millions tuned in on TV and online. The courtroom was packed with press, mourners, and survivors of the cult-like ministry. Prosecutors laid out every chilling detail: the children's heads in the bowls, the demonic book hidden behind his library wall, the CCTV footage of the ritual, and the testimonies from his wife, his housemaid, and even former church workers who had kept silent for years. One church member, Sister Chinya, broke down on the stand, confessing that she had seen things years before: strange midnight meetings, animal sacrifices passed off as Holy Ghost feasts, and whispered names that weren't of God. He said we must never question the spirit, she sobbed. He said the flame demanded obedience. The defense tried to plead insanity, bringing in psychologists who claimed Pastor Amos suffered from delusional psychosis tied to extreme religious indoctrination. But even they admitted the precision of his actions, the planning, the consummate of his dark rituals, none of it aligned with the chaos of insanity. Then came the final moment of the trial. The judge, an elderly man known for his calm demeanor, took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes, and looked at the man who once led Lagos' largest revival crusade. Amos Ebuka Joshua, he began, you were trusted by thousands, seen as a servant of God, a father, and a leader. But you betrayed that trust in a manner too wicked to describe. You murdered your own children in a ritual act that defies reason and humanity. He paused. And yet you sit there, with no remorse, no sorrow, no recognition of your sin. The courtroom was silent. Pastor Amos did not blink. He just stared at the judge like he was watching a spirit float through the air. Therefore, the judge continued, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment, with no possibility of parole. You shall spend the rest of your natural life within the walls of Kurikeri Maximum Security Prison. The gavel fell. The church he built was no more. The headquarters in Ikeja stood in ruins. Branches across Nigeria were closed down by authorities. Hundreds of pastors who had once called him Papa scattered like rats, some going into hiding, others arrested as investigations deepened. Bank accounts linked to the ministry were frozen. Properties seized. Everything built on blood and deception crumbled. Outside the courthouse, a storm broke out. Rain poured heavily, almost violently, as if the sky itself was washing away the sins of the city. As for Pastor Amos, he was escorted in silence back to his cell. No reporters. No applause. No miracles. Just chains. And somewhere in the shadows behind him, the faint, lingering sound of children whispering. The end.